Okay, so continuing on with the second problem, you should find that this is a vertical hyperbola because y is first, and that your center is just kidding. That's a common mistake that happens a lot. Y is first in the equation, but your center is always x comma y. So that would be -3 comma 2. I like to do box method, so I'm going to do that, but feel free to do asymptote method if you would rather. So in this case, my v sub x is going to be -3 plus or minus 5 comma 2, because my b is 5, b squared is 25. Over here, for v sub y, -3 comma 2 plus or minus 7, because your a is 7, your a squared is 49. Your foci, we're going to add and subtract c to the y part because it's vertical. I have to find c, and c squared equals a squared plus b squared, which is 49 plus 25, which is 74. So c equals square root of 74. We cannot reduce that, so I'm just going to leave it as root 74. And you can write that as a decimal if you'd rather. And the equations for the asymptotes, y equals k plus or minus, because it's vertical, it's a over b now. Your a is 7, your b is 5. And then x minus h. So here's all of our stuff. I'm going to go ahead and graph. I have my centers at -3, 2. I'm going to go left and right 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the other side, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Which puts this at -8 if you did it that way. Going up and down 7, my a, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if you're doing points, that's +9. And coming down 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 at -5. I'm going to do box method because I like to do the box. And I'm going to go all the way across, all the way down to my next point, all the way across here, and back up. And from your center, we're going to make diagonal lines through the corners of the boxes. I could do a little better than that. And this way. And then it's vertical, so we're using our y vertices and approaching. We don't want to touch the box with our graph except for that point. So our y vertices approaching both asymptotes. And lastly, add in your foci. Plus or minus root 74, that's somewhere between 8 and 9. So we're going to move up. If we moved up here, that would be 7, 8, 9. Somewhere right around here would be our foci. And down, we move down 7, 8, 9, so somewhere here. And this is what your graph should look like. If you did asymptote method, your asymptote should be right about here. Your y vertices and your center and your foci, you just wouldn't have the box in the x part. Okay, so we are going to continue on and say what happens when you have expanded polynomial form. Just like with ellipse, you're going to have to complete the square. We want to group together our x's and our y's. So we have 4x squared plus 8x. And I'm going to keep the sign inside. So negative 3y squared plus 12y equals negative 16. Move over that constant. So we cannot complete the square with an a term, so we have to factor out the 4 from the x parenthesis. That gives us x squared plus 2x. We're going to factor the negative 3 out of the y parenthesis, and that gives you y squared minus 4y. So be careful of that negative equals negative 16. Now I can complete the square. I can find b over 2 quantity squared. So for your x parenthesis, that's 2 over 2 squared, which equals 1. And for your y parenthesis, that's 4 over 2 quantity squared, which equals 4. I'm going to add that to both sides. Inside the parentheses. So for my x parentheses now going to be x squared plus 2x plus 1. Your y parenthesis is going to be y squared minus 4y plus 4. That's going to equal negative 16. We're going to add 4 times 1, which is 4. We're also going to add negative 3 times 4, which is negative 12. So make sure you're multiplying that outside number times the constant inside before you add it over. And don't forget that sign for that middle one. Simplifying, I can factor my x parenthesis to be x minus x plus 1 quantity squared. And your y parenthesis, y minus 2 quantity squared. Negative 16 plus 4 minus 12 gives you negative 24. And your equation always has to equal 1. So we're going to divide everything by negative 24. I can cross reduce the 4 and the 6 on the bottom. Cross reduce this to be an 8. And that just becomes 1. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. So now I have negative x plus 1 squared over 6. I'm just moving this negative out in front, plus y minus 2 quantity squared over 8, because negative divided by negative is a positive, and that equals 1. We're almost complete, but our positive term always comes first, and we're always subtracting, so we have to flip the x and the y. When we do that, we get y minus 2 quantity squared over 8 minus x plus 1 quantity squared over 6 equals 1. This is our standard form equation. Because your y is in front, it's vertical, because your y is positive, your center is then negative 1, positive 2. Your v sub x is negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 6, because that's the x denominator, comma 2. Your v sub y is negative 1, comma 2 plus or minus the square root of 8, which we can reduce to 2 root 2. or simplify it down that way because 8 is the denominator of y. Your foci, we're going to add to the y and subtract to the y part because it's vertical. We have to find out what c is. So c squared equals a squared. Oops, that should be an 8. Your 8 would be a squared and your b would be 6 squared. So 8 plus 6, a squared plus b squared, which equals 14. And then we want to simplify that. So c equals square root 14. We cannot reduce that radical, so we would just leave it. Or you can put it in a decimal if you want. And our asymptotes, y equals k plus or minus b over a square root 8 over square root 6 times x plus 1. And even though you're not supposed to have a radical on the bottom, you guys can just leave it for this point. I'm not going to make you rationalize. And you can write that as a decimal too. So our center is -1, 2. We're going root 6 left and right. That's like 2.5. So 1, 2.5. And 1, 2.5. We're going up and down root 8, which is almost 3. And down 1, 2, almost 3. We're going to make a box. If you're doing box method, if you're not doing box method, that's okay. Try to keep your boxes straight. Mine are a little wobbly. Through all 4 of your vertices, make your asymptotes through the corners of the box, through the center, and it's vertical, so we're using the y vertices, and we're approaching both asymptotes. Oops. You want to get pretty close to the asymptotes, but not so close that they touch. Just get kind of close. And your foci, root 14, that's almost 4. So we can go down 1, 2, 3, almost 4, and that's your foci. And up almost 4 here. So in this case, we did not get great numbers. We did not get easy whole numbers. That's fine. Just kind of estimate. If you did asymptote form, if you graphed it that way, that's totally fine. And so this is how we would graph a expanded form hyperbola. Finding the equation, being really careful of your minus signs. When you factor out that -3, you're changing the inside sign here. And then when we divide by -24, the x became negative and the y became positive, and then we had to flip them to get our proper form. So be very careful about that once you find all your stuff. And this is the end of the hyperbola videos.